Today is Wednesday, which means that it's Black Writer Wednesday, doing another live. And that's 3 weeks in a row that I made it. I'm proud of myself. So I am here to share some writerly wisdom with you. And we are going to talk today. I'm going to share a little bit of a story. And then also going to, we're going to talk about like when you're trying to nail that next big idea. Hey, Lionel. When you're trying to nail that next big idea and you're just like stuck, like you can't figure out like what is my next story idea, and trying to figure it out, but you just like can't break through, right? Because this recently happened to me. So I want to share how you can start to break through that. But let me introduce myself. For anyone who doesn't know me, my name is Kristen Iris Johnson. I am a film producer, a writer, and a pleasure activist. And what that means is that I help Black writers and creatives use pleasure and other practices to amplify their creative work and their impact, because our work, our voices, our stories are really important, and they are the kinds of things that inspire and create change in the world. So when you want to write something new and you're stuck and you can't figure out your idea, how do you break through so that you can actually have your voice out there in the world? So I'm going to rewind it a little bit and share a little bit of how this came up and how this recently worked with me. Recently, I was trying to come up with a TV series concept for a certain opportunity. So I knew that I wanted it to be something in like the fantasy, sci-fi, supernatural realm, because that's what I love. But it also had to be something that could be produced on a budget, right? Now, fantasy, sci-fi, supernatural is expensive, because there's effects, sometimes there's action, there's stunt, there's visual shit. And not just like visual effects that are done after, but sometimes there's practical effects, and like all that stuff costs money, right? So like as a producer, as a writer and a producer, my producer brain is always going and thinking about the money when I'm coming up with ideas. So my problem was that I was coming up with ideas, but they were all stuff that was like not feasible to make on the kind of budget that I was looking at. So it's like, what do you do, right? I was just like, I was getting concepts, but I wasn't really getting like story ideas. I was having like broader concepts. So what can happen in that situation is like, it sort of feels a little bit like idea constipation or like story constipation, where you're like, I know what realm I want to be writing in, but like the actual story is eluding you, right? Now this doesn't happen to me very often, I'm going to be honest, because I will get story ideas from different things. Like a lot of times it'll be like, I'll just imagine like a moment between people, and then I'll start to craft the story of like, okay, how did they get there? Who are these people? And I'll start to craft the story out of that. Or a character will kind of drop into my head, and I'll be like, oh, this is this thing about this person, this is the character, and like, what is their life? I'll start imagining that, and then the story will form. But that's not really the direction I could go this time. I really had to, because I knew what genre I wanted to be writing in, I was kind of starting there, and then I was getting stuck on like, well, what is the fucking story? Who are the characters? Like, could not figure it out. So in general, one of the things that I think is really helpful when you're like trying to come up with a new idea, but you can't really nail it, or it's just like the idea is eluding you, but you know, like the general maybe like concept or genre or something, is to go back to consuming story. So that can be reading books. It can be, for me, I was actually looking at like TV series and movies, because I was looking at a TV, I was looking to write a TV series concept. For you, if you're like writing books, then maybe going and reading books. And it's not about like stealing an idea or anything like that, but it's like, hey, let me go read something creative that will sort of open up my mind around what I can create. And then that kind of gets your own creative juices flowing of like, oh, like maybe something broadens your view. Like if you've ever read, like if you're like, oh, I want to write a supernatural story, and then you read Octavia Butler's The Fledgling, it's kind of a vampire story, but they're not really vampires. So it's like a different take on a vampire story. And even it can just broaden your mind around like, oh, I can take this kind of view of this concept. Oh, maybe I can take this kind of view of this. Maybe I'll do something with like, like psychics or something, and then you're taking like a different view, but like it's something that can expand your ideas around what you can create. So that's really, I mean, think about when you create something, when you write something, you're expanding people's ideas, you're bringing them into your imagination, you're broadening what they can even like think of and imagine, and that's what you get to do as well. So like consume other creative work, and it also helps to broaden and expand your creativity because it just gets you thinking in a different way. So I found that to be something that was helpful. I usually find that to be something that was helpful. In this case, with this TV series that I was trying to like really get a story for, I was, like I said, I was getting these ideas, but they were all stuff that was like, okay, I definitely don't have, like, this is definitely outside of the budget that I would be working with. So like, what the hell do you do then? So consuming creative work is really helpful. As creatives, we do need to be also, engaging with creative work. But what I also found was like actually bouncing ideas off of someone else. So when I was like, I've got this concept and I've got this concept, and one I knew wasn't feasible because I'm like, this is action and I want to see some fighting, and I was like, it's like, when you were a kid and you were like, oh, Mom, can we go to McDonald's? And she was like, you got McDonald's money? That's like this. Like, you got action money? No, I don't have action money. I don't have fight scene money. Okay. So I was like, all right, this is not feasible. So some of my concepts I already knew weren't feasible, but I was like, there was one. I'm like, I could definitely do something with this, but it was still really broad and I didn't really know where to nail it down. So I actually started talking to someone else who's a writer, and we were like bouncing ideas off of it. We ended up coming up with this concept, and now we're developing a TV series together, which is like really fun, like we're having a blast with it. But that's actually one of the ways that I was able to break through, is like talking it out, bouncing ideas off of other people. Now, this is something that I've actually been doing for, oh God, almost decades at this point, is like having an idea or bouncing ideas off of other people. It's really important to get other people's feedback, but not even just feedback, but like when you talk it out with trusted people, I'm not saying share your idea with everybody, but when you talk it out with like a trusted person or a trusted friend, especially another writer, it really helps to like, it's like you're getting more than one brain on a problem, so it's not just your brain, you're like feeding off of someone else. They're like, oh, maybe you could do this, and you're like, yeah, and then this could happen. And so it ends up being this like really cool back and forth that is like this co-creation that's happening. I mean, in this case, for me, it ended up being a co-creation because now we are actually, developing this TV series together, but it's not necessarily a co-creation. Like, I have had ideas before where I'm like, oh, like I'm thinking of doing this, and I bounce it off of like my very, very good friend that we've been bouncing ideas off of each other for like the last, 20 years actually, and she'll be like, oh, well, maybe this can happen, or like, that makes sense. I could see this character, feeling this way about something, and I'll be like, oh yeah, and then it'll just kind of like expand the story more for me to be like, oh, let me go like write down these things about these characters. Let me go and like, like it just opens up things about the characters when you bounce it off of another brain. So like I said, I'm not saying tell everybody your idea or your concept, but if you have like those trusted, this is also why it's important to have writer friends. When you have these trusted writer friends, or colleagues, these people that you can go to and be like, I'm stuck on this, or like, this is my character, or this is my story, but I'm not really sure where I want to go, then even just having someone else's brain to bounce it off of can be really helpful and can expand and open up your idea, and then just kind of like give you just like enough to be like, oh, let me run this way with it. And you might change directions later. That's kind of the fun part about developing story. Like, I love developing story, is you can change directions later, but like it'll at least get your ideas flowing so that you can start to like put the concept or the character or the story together, and then you can go into, creating it. So that's, hope this is helpful for you. Wanted to kind of share a little bit of like seriously, for like 2 weeks, I was like, I don't know why I can't come up with an idea. It's like all I could come up with is concepts. And actually, again, part of it was that I had a limit on budget. But even with that, I was like, wow, I don't normally have this much trouble with this. And it's like consuming other creative work, just kind of like getting my brain thinking about different stories in different ways helped. And then also really what that breakthrough was when I started talking it out, or like talking out an idea with someone else, and then that started to bring the story together. And then we were like, well, we're going to do this together. But it has helped in the past as well, of like, well, I've got this idea and I bounce it off of like one or two like good friends of mine who are writers. And then it's like, they give me an idea, or like they just get me thinking a little different about the character. And I'm like, oh, and it gives you something else to explore. So definitely understand like writing story, even before you get to the writing, the like developing and the creating of a story is an exploration. Sometimes you are learning the characters, you're learning the world with the characters, and you're learning it as you go. And like, give yourself that space to like explore the world that you're creating, explore like the possibilities, and just see where it goes. Because you're not even necessarily like, you're not locked into it until like something is published or something is on screen. You're not locked into it. Let me tell you, even when we are producing a film, we can be like a week before production or like in the middle of production, and something's got to change that quick because something isn't working, because like a schedule shifted, or something happened with the location or something, and then you got to change it right there in the middle of production. Like, it might be a little change. It's usually not like a big change, but there might be a little change. So like, things like that happen all the time until that. And then even in the editing room, and Lionel has been was in here on the live, watching the live. He's been our editor for a couple of projects. Even he could tell you, like, even when you're editing, things will change. You will have to make adjustments. And then the story starts to, like, the way that the story comes together might be a little different than it was in the script, because the editing might change it. So until that story is on screen, there's always something shifting. There's always something changing. There's always someone that's coming in and saying like, well, let's do this, let's do that. That's part of the creative process. So like, don't think that like, just because you have an idea, you're locked into it. There's always evolution and change that can happen with it. That's gonna help it to develop and make it better. So I hope this was helpful for you guys. Want to let you know that this thing is not pasting again. So I was going to put it in the comments, but it's not working. So never mind that. I do have a free video training for writers, for script or book writers, but it's called 3 Keys to Writing a Stellar Story, or 3 Keys to Writing a Powerful Story. And it is for free. You can get it at KristenIris.com/3keys, as in the number 3 keys, or you can click the link in my bio if you're on Instagram, and you can go get it there. And this is going to take you through like 3 key things that you have to have in your story, and how they work together to make your story like really solid, powerful, and something that has your audience like, oh man, I want to know what's going to happen, and has your audience wanting more from you. And so this is something that's going to be helpful if you are a book writer. It's going to be helpful if you are a script writer and you are trying to like get that producer hooked into your story. You want to get that talent hooked into your story. You want to get that director like, yeah, I want to direct that. Then you want to go and get this video training, because it's going to help you to really write a solid story. And that is like my strength as a writer and as a creative, is in story and developing like really solid stories. So you can go get the free video training at KristenIris.com/3keys, or like I said, click the link in my bio. And that is all I have for you for today's Black Writer Wednesday. And I will see you guys in the next live.